situation, but I think it's a good way to end off the broadcast, because again, we are seeing these relatively comparable mirrored lineups, but we are seeing the Demon Hunters in play this time around. However, I think what would have topped it off perfectly is if Felkeine was also able to play his Warlock, because that's not really a deck that we've seen make a big impact in the European region so far. So I would have liked to have seen it show its face over here, because it is super draw focused for Felkeine. Double Hand of Gul'dan thrown in there as well, with no matrons to discard them. Just 2 hard cast Hand of Gul'dan in his deck.
And getting into this matchup, this is a matchup we did test a lot yesterday, actually. I was the Priest and Derek was the Demon Hunter in a lot of the cases. And it felt like a bit of an uphill climb for the Priest, and that might sound a little bit weird, but it's one of, I think, at least a few matchups where Brutes just stop the game. Right? Like, it's one of the few matchups where Brutes become more of a win condition than the combo, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do think the big difference with this hybrid version of the deck now is the Immolation Aura.
Yes.
And I think, like, obviously, on average, this version of the deck plays Brutes a little bit later than the original straight-up Brute version of the deck, right? But that, on average, is only maybe a fraction of a turn or one whole turn later. However, in order to bridge that gap, you have cards like Moarg, Spell Damage, and Immolation Aura in your deck, whereas the original Brute Demon Hunter had to literally ignore all the damage that was coming at them from the Priest and just try and do the Brute thing. This version of the deck can actually play a much more honest removal game for a few turns while setting up those Brute turns to snap back at the opponent.
Also, one thing that came up a lot was just winning on board with other minions, like just playing Moarg, Felscream Blast, don't care about the combo late game, just blast the minions away, heal for tons, and you just push Priest into a corner they can't really come out of. So we'll be interested to see if Gaby values just getting minions on board versus, trying to hold them for anything overly fancy. Felkeine, in the meantime, though, is piling on a good amount of pressure, right? He has the Divine Shield on the Void Touch, now has the Raised Dead with Wriggling Horror to push even more damage. Does mean that Gaby's going to have to put up some level of defense pretty soon.
Divine Shield on Divine Shields this turn. I think if you actually check under your seats, you'll find that everyone in the audience gets a free Divine Shield.
Oh, nice. Murloc especially.
That's an upgrade.
Yep.
Probably.
I mean, this just goes to show you how to properly treat a Murloc, right? Letta just hero powers his own Murlocs and just sacrifices them to the gods at any given opportunity. Felkaine's treating that Murloc right, giving it Divine Shield.
Also, nice placement for Felscream Blast as well, just minimizing the potential outcome that could happen.
Yes. There are arguments to be had about it. Sometimes you have to think about priorities, about whether, like, do you want to prevent maximum clearage or do you want to prevent maximum health gain? If you solely want to prevent maximum health gain, sometimes it's better to alternate Divine Shield and no Divine Shield, just so there's no, like, consecutive targets that can get hit by them. Immolation or a Tusk Piercer will actually draw more cards here. Pretty sick off the acrobatic.
Yeah, and then there's Brute, there's Philosophy. It's so close.
Yeah, crucial to do it in this order as well, because doing it this way, he gets the Brute down to 0 before playing the Philosophy. Yep. It was actually very important that the acrobatics cards were playable there, because if they weren't, he would not have been able to discount the Brute heavily enough to get it down below the Moarg mana to be able to even guarantee this play.
Yeah, he would have just played one Brute, right? Yep. If he hadn't been able to double proc. And this is what I was talking about. It's one of the few matchups at the moment where Brutes just are a massive problem. It's so much damage to punch through, especially when there's more than one. But I think you might recall even in testing yesterday, there was a point where Derek could have just played like a 5-mana Brute, and that would have slowed me down enough. And that's just 1, 6, 7 Brute is a problem. And you can see right now, even with Felkaine's 2-3 attack minions, it just doesn't really matter.
And there's just enough health on Gaby as well to cut out even the potential out on the other side of just like play your other Void Touched Attendant, ping the face, and just say, that's my plan. Yeah. I think it is the plan anyway. From
I agree.
But in the end, I think there's just too much health to be cutting through here.
And it's only one Felscream with that Moarg really away from a good time.
Chaos.
That'll do. Yep.
Blam! 16.
You have
Kablam! Concede.
Okay.
Gaby takes game number 1, and like I said, I'll be completely honest. When I first saw the this Demon Hunter deck kind of crop up this week, and I thought about the lineups that we expected to see, Shadow Priest, I think, was almost a given in this week for Grandmasters. I thought, oh, that, you know, Demon Hunter messes about for quite a while. Yes! Once a week. I'd love to see it. Thank you. So, you know, I went in feeling like Demon Hunter, oh, they mess about for a fair few turns. Do you just kill them in that time? Like, great. And you can see it feels that way, it looks that way. But the second they do anything half decent, you're like, oh, hang on a minute. They still have a million cards. They've either cleared the board and healed, they've played brutes. Game over, because you just can't overcome that. And it's honestly a matchup where you need to do that setup with damage and then exactly a Lucia to gain the additional turn.
I don't know what's causing that Muzzy bug. Whatever gremlin in the system is causing that to come up before replays, but I really think we should just lean into it and just put Comic Sans font over it with like Muzzy's chest-beating play of the week. So when it comes up, it's just, there we go, him playing a brute was our play of the week from Gaby. Congratulations.
Yeah,
I think that would improve the broadcast massively.
Felkeine going to be moving over to this Garrote Rogue, going up against Gaby's question marks. He's not picked the deck yet. I'm just waiting for that to fill out.
Yeah, Felkeine on...
It's Priest. Right, come on, Felkeine.
Okay, Raven gets to bet on the matchup again. But yeah, I think Felkeine has been one of the players that's shown he has been putting some work into Garrote Rogue, certainly. I think the French contingent as a whole have been putting a lot of work into the deck. I think we've seen Swids, you know, previously relegated Grandmaster Swids, hitting rank 1 legend with the deck before. I think it's a deck that the French community are very keen on overall. But Gaby has got off to a flyer in this series. And now it's going to go over to Raven's 50-50 matchup, which I believe has so far been 100% today for the Priest to finally get one on the board for Rogue if Felkeine is going to gain a foothold in this series.
I am getting to the point of desperation where I'll take any percentage below 100 just to recover something here. But Gaby, yeah, is going to be on that Priest. Let's look as the players get into the game and see what these mulligans look like.
That looks like an Octobot. I think that has been missing ingredient number 1 for a lot of these rogues in this matchup over time. Apart from when it has just been Eluciated by the opponent. So I guess the missing ingredient is Octobot and no Elucia on the other side, which is what we have here currently. But that is a lot of raised deads. That is a lot of pressure that's going to keep going for many, many turns here for Gaby.
Yeah, do you think we are going to see coin here from Gaby, or is he okay just going 1-1-1? With review of turn 2 to see what comes out?
I think it's just one-on-one here, yeah. I think this gives him maximum flexibility going forward.
Efficient is sufficient.
Great time for Octobot. Can't coin the Lucia whilst proccing it.
True.
Genius play. I love it.
Yeah.
And we're just going to choose to proc the Octo again. Makes sense if he can do it in a reasonable way.
It is now the full 0 mana hand for Felkeine.
Too early to go Secret Passage? Might be right, because he has Brain Freeze. Just no good way to proc it unless he Shadow Step. Can trade the Octo Shadow Step. Like Brain Freeze Plunderer, but that's probably a bit too much overkill.
You can also do a play which I really do like in this matchup against Priest, which is try and go for a one-off super tempo turn with a Secret Passage. Like, he could have Shadow Stepped the Octobot, replayed the Octobot, and then played Secret Passage, all for 0 mana still. That's ambitious because obviously there's no way to proc the Octobot guaranteed. I do like that play a lot more when you know you're attacking your Octobot into a minion on board that turn.
Yeah.
You can just play the Secret Passage, discount that whole hand, tempo out super hard. But it was something that was available that turn.
And this is still kind of tempoing out pretty hard, right? Like, he's getting a lot done here. He might not... Yeah, he's going to get everything done. Okay. Maximum removal. Maximum effort. little wink and a nod there from Felkeine. Happy with his turn.
And he's jamming.
Dangerous to do versus Gab Jam.
It is indeed.
As you mentioned earlier, that is a lot of raised heads.
Yep. However, this could spell potential disaster here for Felkeine as jamming intensifies. Because now it looks like spell damage is being left up. There's a cram session here, drawing multiple cards. There's a prep to do it for free. There's a shadow step for the Octobot that's still being left up on board. This could be a massive hand getting rediscounted again this turn. And there's a prize plunderer to go alongside all of that as well.
Is that exactly what Gaby wants him to do? And then he just rips the Lucia next turn and just plays everything. The fear's there. Yes, it's Ignite for spot removal.
Yeah, seems okay. For 1 mana, it is fairly efficient. What does the rest of the turn look like, though? It's going to be Prize Plunderer. Seeing if the Shadow Step is worth it. At this point, you would have to... Well, I guess you do have the other Ethereal Org Merchant, but I was thinking maybe you'd have to Shadow Step the Octobot, trade in the One Thief to remove the spell damage, and then Brain Freeze your own Octobot, which seems kind of wasteful in that position when Brain Freeze is such an effective offensive removal spell at this point. Yeah. I think using the Shadow Step for the Prize Plunderer here makes a lot more sense.
I mean, look at the health it's removing, right? It's huge, and if Felkeine can just hold the board, it really is on Gaby to do something pretty big, and he's not got it. He's not even going to wait to see. The concede there from Gaby, and like I've been saying all day, Rogue wins the matchup.
Wait, hang on. Just misquoting yourself now. This has got layers. This running bit
Go with it.
Is just evolved to a certain point. Hang on. Didn't you correct me like 7 different times that that's not what you said? I've kind of lost the thread of what's happening.
I said Rogue wins this specific game matchup.
Oh, I see. It was just literally an observation of what just happened.
Yes. I'm just saying words. Anyway, most importantly, we're evening it up. Gaby going to be back on his Priest, and we are going to dive into a Priest mirror. Just checking out the list, I'm pretty sure they're identical. Like we said, there's only a couple of players messing about with the list, especially Gaby on the Rogue, which we unfortunately, for Saul's sake, will not get to see. It was the perfect deck list as far as he was concerned.
It absolutely is, yeah. It's a really interesting rogue list. Aside from the fact that it is just 15 2-ofs with 0 legendaries, it's also 2 animated broomsticks, 0 preps, 2 penfling. Like, there's all kinds of weird stuff going on there. But it's certainly broomstick is a card that I've seen many situations where it's like, well, rogue's dead here, and then my brain goes, well, why is the rogue dead here? And then my brain goes, well, because there's no broomstick in the deck. That's the only thing that could possibly get them back on board from this position. So it does make me ask questions about why more people aren't running Broom, but yes, less about the banned deck, more about the matchup that we have in front of us. We've seen this play out once already today. It is a very zooey matchup. If you are familiar with 2014, 2015, 2016 Zoo, where it's just a battle for board, 2 very aggressive decks forced to trade into each other, and the winning metric is basically who has more minions in play. That is basically what this matchup is about.
And although, after Saul's very correct description of the matchup, of course, the Homunculus might look bad because it's a 1-mana minion that isn't a minion for a while, its stats are just worth it, right? You saw even Felkeine kind of wince at that turn 1 play, which looks... Turn 1, not a minion. Oh no! But the fact that this pops out as a 2/5, it's so much health to punch through. I was talking earlier in the Shaman matchup that Feral Spirits at 2/2/3s were very awkward to punch through, but you know, a 2/5 on its own still is a big problem. And Gaby already taking control of this early board state, and already, Saul, it's kind of hard to fight back here.
Yes, so sorry, the winning metric is who has more minions. I'm counting 4 versus 0. Yep, okay, seems good.
We're casting the whole matchup like this.
I'm counting 2 versus 1. Last time, I just counted the dormant minion as a minion, and now I'm not counting it as a minion because it fits the narrative better.
And now it's not dormant, so it's 2/2, all's even.
Oh, Raised Dead's going to allow him to play multiple minions here. He might get back into the lead.
The Divine Shield. Okay, going a little bit more focused here. The Divine Shield is absolutely huge as well for the Homunculus. It makes it even harder to punch through. I'm gonna load up the Tour Guide instead. I kind of like the Divine Shield, just because there's a 2/3 on the board.
What are you spending your mana on next turn? Because as long as there's room to fit in that Tour Guide next turn, I think it is strictly better to play the Divine Shield this turn, but it's again just a consideration of what do you get out of this Raised Dead, what card do you draw off the top, is there a world where you get punished for not having played Tour Guide? Because I do think in a vacuum, Tour Guide is the most powerful effect in this matchup, right? Where you just get 0 mana hero power every given turn, so any turn you can have Tour Guide effect active, you probably should endeavor to do that. It's just by making this play, Gaby feels like he'll have enough mana next turn to do that anyway.
Felkeine probably a little bit unhappy that he can't actually kill off this Kulturan unless he hero powers it himself. Because I think he would like it in the Raised Dead pool. Is that fair?
I must consider.
It might be one of the only ways he starts to really fight back if he can start just like giving minions +2 and then +2 again.
Yeah, it's true. But I do think getting double Tour Guide back here is also pretty strong from Felkeine. I think there's a dynamic as well where Kulturan Chaplain is a much better card when you are ahead, right? Like I think a Gaby hand full of Kulturan Chaplains would be better than a Felkeine hand full of Kulturan Chaplains at this point. It's the same thing. It's just Groundhog Day, the matchup. That's what we're watching.
All this is making me think of, are we getting Half-Life 3 with this? Guardian Org Merchant coming down on board. Maybe 3 in a row for Felkeine.
3 Gordons on the same board. Half-Life 3 confirmed, Raven.
All adding up, isn't it?
Tour Guide comes down, Hero Power comes down for 0, takes some trades, Tour Guide down again for the following turn. Gaby knows there is one remaining Tour Guide in the opponent's hand that can come back to fight this.
This is the stage in the game where Homunculus does feel slow. So see, Felkeine plays it now. Yes, it probably pops on the turn that Gaby might want to set up lethal, but still, it's slow right now, and right now is all that really matters.
Yeah, and so Felkeine, I think, just choosing to play Void Touch Attendant out here just as a 1/3, I would imagine, just to be able to fight for board.
So,
yep.
It's the rule. He has more minions, so Void Touched is fine.
Precisely. Yeah. So like, we have been kind of memeing about this more when we have explaining it, but like, this is a very real dynamic, and the reason is, and it's looked weird in this game because there's been so many Tour Guides, but the comparison to Zoo and other aggro decks is that generally those decks are bad at playing for removal when they're not on board, right? Yes. So when you're talking about the dynamic of who has more minions, if you have 4 minions and your opponent has 2, you have 4 different minions that you can choose to buff with your buff card, and 4 different varieties of value trade, 8 different varieties of value trade, your 4 minions into their 2 minions, right? If you're the other way round, your options are far more limited because you don't have the range of different minions that you can choose to buff and trade in different ways. So when we talk about having more minions giving you greater control of the matchup, that's why. And it's also amplified in this particular 2021 Shadow Priest mirror because of Void Touched Attendant. If you have 5 minions and your opponent has 1, Void Touched Attendant is massively in your favor.
I've just thought of a new thing we need to add to our lovely caster controls here for the graphics.
Go on.
Do you know the looking for card?
Yeah.
I want one to say anything but that. Because it's true for Felkeine right now, because a second Homunculus is just not it.
It really isn't. Particularly when there is just a 5/4 on the board to be able to contest them anyway, right? Like, they're not even impressive once they wake up because of the board state.
Not now, yeah, exactly, yeah. And Ganling, I don't think... Is there any card that makes Felkeine have the ability to kill this? I do not think so. And that means anything Gaby draws off the top becomes a 4/4, which is a pretty good trade. Oh, he's just going to get the trade now. He'll take it.
Oh!
And you've got to love that even Felkeine's laughing at this because he knows just how stupidly powerful these couple of draws have been. And I imagine that is going to be a get me out of this game.
The difference between the two reactions as well, like Felkeine's just like, yeah, of course, hilarious. Gaby drawing the absolute nuts. Gaby, nothing unusual is happening in Gaby's world. He's just like, yeah, this is how Hearthstone works. You draw the best possible card every turn. What do you mean?
Most emotional we might get is if he screams, "This is Hearthstone," whilst booting Felkeine into some bottomless pit. But yeah, that's a big deal there. Winning the Priest Mirror, you see yet again just how cutthroat that mirror is. It's just hyper-aggressive fighting for the board. And that, like you said, was a weird one. Think of every tour guide we saw, and then think if each player had to spend 2 mana to do that thing.
Yes, exactly.
The game would look dramatically different. It does mean we are going to jump into game number 4, though, where Gaby's going to be on this Warlock going up yet again against Felkeine's Priest. And I'm sure we'll take a look at it in a second, but Gaby's Warlock, again, is very close to the threat version of Warlock. He's running the 1 Rust Rot Viper and the 1 Unstable Shadow Ball. And interestingly enough, Sottle, no Tamsin.
No Tamsin indeed. It's very rare that I find myself disagreeing with Gaby, even on plays, on deck building. Like, it got to the point where I was even annoyed with how predictable I was being, because I don't like coming on air and people being able to predict what I'm going to say, but I know, like, even in our private caster chats, I've been like, oh, I think Gaby has the best lineup again. I'm actually annoyed by it. Like, I'm not just going to go out there and lie and say something that I don't believe in, but I wish Gaby just didn't have the best lineup. This time, I don't think Gaby has the best lineup, because I do disagree. I think Tamsin is just too powerful a card to be cutting from Warlock overall. I would also put his Rogue in unproven territory, which is why I would have liked to have seen it play out, because it's, even though aesthetically I love it with 15 2-offs, not playing any preps, I think we've seen how many times we've got to the end of a game and gone, well, this might be possible because there are preps remaining, right? And without that, I think you cut into your lethal out significantly. You also cut into your early game outs with Prep Shroud and Prep Swindle in the early game to really get you going. So I have some questions about that as well. So there's some holes for me in this lineup overall from Gaby, but certainly he's a good enough player to be able to carry it through.
And I'll actually add one more as well. I was trying this Warlock list out.
Yeah.
I don't know if you recall, but yesterday during practice I was like, no, it's not got Tamsin in it. You know, when we were playing, because we were playing the list I had. I was trying this Warlock out, and I don't mind the lack of Tamsin as much as you mind it, but my problem is the lack of Tamsin and no Battleground Battlemaster. Because that feels like you're removing like 2 very strong plays you've got, like the lethal threat in itself of Battlegrounds Battlemaster to steal some wins, but also you don't have the sheer value play of Tamsin. So that's where I kind of draw the line with this list, is that both of those things are missing. And while I said just one sentence, Felkeine's already built a board, pressuring Gaby. But there is the Soulfire, the Soul Rend Soul.
Yes.
Flashback, man. Jeez.
However, there is infinity damage coming back the other way, and problematically, the Soul Rend is not going to be dealing with the Traveling Merchant on the other side.
Yeah, I think this is 15. If he hero powers.
If he hero powers, okay. Yeah. So he will be 1-off lethal next turn from what Gaby can see with the Soul Rend. Doesn't seem ideal.
Yep, goes for the Unstable Shadow Blast, kills off the Merchant, trades into the Void Touched. But I believe that is still just lethal, right? Because he can... Oh, wait, is he 1-off or am I not counting right?
Tour Guide, Hero Power.
Oh, this is right. Yeah.
He
plays the
Twilight
Void
Deceptor,
Touch.
Raised Dead, Void Touched. Yep, it's exactly lethal.
Yep. That was Fast and Furious. And they're just straight... It's one of the fastest games I think I've ever cast in my life. Felkeine evens up the series with just the 1-2-3 punch there from Priest. And again, it's one of those moments where I think the initial opinions of Warlock versus Priest were, oh, it's a Soul Rend matchup, right? If you get Soul Rend and play it, you win. And yes, this was extreme levels of speed, but it's one of those issues, right? Even you said then, like, well, if Soul Rend's played, well, even if that keeps him alive and he had more health, there's a Merchant that survives that. So yeah, it was kind of difficult for Warlock to deal with those super fast openings, but now Felkeine is going to be on that hybrid Demon Hunter going up against the Warlock. What do you think about this matchup?
Well, before that, I first want to comment on the fact that game was legit like 1 minute long.
Oh yeah.
And at the end of it, there in Felkeine's like winner's shot, there we saw him like message the admin and then get up to go do something. What did you possibly need to do that you didn't need to do a minute ago in the last break? Like, come on, sit down and play some Hearthstone.
A lot can change in 1 minute. Okay, that's a long time if you sit and count.
But now we are going to see the hybrid OTK Demon Hunter coming back into play for Felkeine. Very similar list to what Gaby was playing overall. The 2 Immolation Aura in there. No Sigil Runners, which I think is the big debate right now. A couple of players, particularly in APAC, are playing more Sigil Runners, less Immolation Auras. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2 of the Sigil Runners going in there as well. Sometimes making room for Viper or Rustrot Viper or no Rustrot Viper thrown in there as well. But I do think this is a matchup which has improved somewhat, I would say, against the handlock on the other side, because you actually have the big OTK potential. You actually have ways to clear big minions, which you didn't have before, with some discovered Chaos Leeches, with some big spell damage AoEs, for example. So again, I think this is a pretty interesting one to come down to at the end of the series. And I'm glad that we are ending the day on a hybrid Demon Hunter game, despite seeing it banned so often throughout the course of the day, because it has been the big talking point leading up to this, and it's a shame that when a deck is such a big talking point that we don't actually get to see it because it gets banned so often.
It's too much of a talking point. Ban it.
Yeah, true.
Here, though, Gaby does have this Rune Mithril Rod into backfire, the exact opening you're looking at, or looking for, should I say, almost all the time.
Ooh, very nice. Coin Spectral Sight for a quest proc on 2. You love to see it. Very mediocre discounts overall, though. Again, OTK Demon Hunter has now evolved to the point where you don't really care too much about hitting actual combo pieces with your discounts.
Right.
You would much rather hit additional card draw for the following turn, so you can turbo through quest as aggressively as possible. Felkeine, rewarded for the Rustrot Viper he is playing in his deck, because that means he is getting the weapon out of the way, he is getting rid of the rod, backfire comes down, significantly less punishing than it was previously, and now Felkeine even has the opportunity to set up a very nice looking glide for himself over the next turn or two.
Yeah, and I would say that it's probably fair to even just say that although Felkeine kind of skipped a turn by playing Viper, which is the thing you feel a little bit as the Demon Hunter in this scenario, like, yes, you kill their weapon, but you also don't have a draw turn. It's actually way more painful for the Warlock to lose that Mithril Rod, because the Mithril Rod's just more powerful than the average draw turn over the course of the game.
I have a question for you, Raven.
Go on.
When you get glided, when you get glowed.
Yeah, glowed, thank you. Use the right one.
Sorry, when you get glowed, do you recognize where it came from in the hand, or do you just have to wait and see whether your cards disappear when you're just like playing against someone on ladder?
Definitely cards disappear.
Okay. Okay.
I will say, 80% of the time that I'm laddering, I'm also probably doing something else as well. So, like, whether it's watching something. So, yeah, 100% it's like, no, that's annoying when I see my cards go away. That's literally the only read.
I see.
Bit of a weird hand here from Felkeine. I guess he goes for Studies, right? To try and hit Spectral.
Well, he already has quest locked up without it if he really wanted to, so he could just choose to discount that for the following turn instead.
Demon.
Try and set up for a cheaper final quest turn with the Kurtrus. Tough choice, honestly.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, actually, because this means that his Studies is more likely to get something done next turn. If he Studies and whiffs, well, he's not clearing out 2 Felkeine blasts from his hand, is he?
Ooh. Very nice. He is going to play the Sigil, even though he doesn't get the Kurtrus in play before those cards gets drawn. It's still 1 additional card draw that gets a little bit of a discount anyway. And my mistake, I thought that was only the second proc of the quest at that point going into turn 5, but I forgot he spent... we were talking about the glide. The glide also completed the quest, the proc of the quest, but there was that turn 2 proc as well that I forgot to factor in. So, of course, the Illidari Studies doesn't get discounted, but he can still throw it out there with the Kurtrus on the following turn anyway.
Yep. We are slowly moving on to the point that worried me when I was playing this list, is that you can't Tamsin for loads of healing against, say, brutes, because he doesn't have Tamsin. And also, this Null, and even a Giant as well, even if you could play a Giant this turn, it's not even like overly threatening to Felkeine, right? Because he knows there's no Battleground Battlemaster. So I feel like you just miss like one or the other. Obviously some players, a lot of players like both, but missing both just feels like you limit yourself on like some of the really powerful threats you have in the game.
You see Felkeine, I think, very relieved in the end not to be seeing huge threats come down, not to be seeing Neophyte come down either, which basically gives him the free turn he wants to just jam this Kurtrus into play. Might just see him hold off one more time on the Illidari Studies, tradable with the Guild Trader instead. Immolation Aura is a lovely pickup for a bit of security here for Felkeine, I think, because now he has big AoE potential on a coming turn as well.
Yep, Gaby he's going to get the proc on this tap, right? I can't, he's hovering the Neophyte over it, but pretty sure he's 3 out of 4 already?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, yeah, so he is going to get the proc on the tap. Double Drain Soul at 0 mana. It's pretty nice here. He will go to 10 cards as well, so that's just, his whole hand becomes playable.
Yeah, the question is whether he wants to raise dead before the tap first, right, to discount the minions, which I think he does. He's looking for another Cult Neophyte in the pool, so he can continue to play that this turn as well.
Ooh.
Fantastic ordering here. Down to 9 cards, so he can now tap.
Now watch the mana all go away.
Yep. And he can play his entire hand for 3 mana. Alright, he's 1 off in reality. I apologize for misleading you viewers. Of course, the relevant problem with that statement is that he's 1 off, and not that obviously he doesn't want to play Soul Rend this turn.
Yeah. Board space.
You just drain Soul your own stuff.
Oh yeah.
Easy.
You get accustomed to the smell.
Yeah, nice slow turn there from Gaby to face down Felkeine.
And it's gone. It's just all dead.
Yeah.
He might choose to preserve a Moarg here. He might value Moarg more than killing a Giant, especially because of that lack of Battlemaster dynamic that you were talking about before.
I grow impatient.
Having a Moarg in hand obviously increases how quickly he can get to potential lethal outs with Il'gynoth, Philosophy, so on off the top. Actually, he has Philosophy in hand as well.
Yeah, he can Philosophy. But then he wouldn't have the mana for the clear, right?
He wouldn't have the AoE, yeah. But I do like this. I think leaving the Giant there is absolutely fine. Because even worst case scenario, if he just doesn't get the lethal soon enough where he has to kill the Giant, no problem. Philosophy your 0 mana Moarg, play the Moarg, Fell Screen, blast the Giant, and whatever's next to it, right? Clear it up.
And this is what I was talking about, right? Just the complete lack of threat of Battlemaster. You do feel it. Just the fact that your opponent knows it's not in the deck list. It's not about whether you would draw it or not or whatever. It's just the fact that they know it's there or not.
Studies for card draw. Spectre will do very nicely.
Okay.
Up to 3 0 mana Moargs in the hand right now. There is a 4 mana Il'gynoth.
Looks good to me. You can just make 3 Moargs, right?
Yep.
Has to be lethal.
It is. Only because you have 2 Fell Screams, though. One on the opponent's stuff, one on your own stuff. Otherwise, it would just be 24.
Make sure the order's right. Felkeine could take the win there. And a really big win. Obviously, Felkeine was our winner from last week. And having a great recovery week in terms of points. But taking a victory and not only taking down Gaby, but moving on to that top 8, because he can build on his success from last week. really feel secure, and it must be a relief already for him. I think making it to top 8 this week versus the first 3 weeks of Grandmasters, I guess. He must have been in a pretty rough spot, honestly, in terms of his approach to the weeks. But really paying for this hard work for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think so too. And I hope for all of our sakes that was not Felkeine just tweeting spoilers at that point, because we are in a little bit of a delay here. But he was very eagerly tapping away on his phone there. I'm sure he's delighted with the series. I think we saw his emotions overall showing that he was very invested in that series. And I think you set it up perfectly going into this, where he was trying to capitalize, right? He was trying to ride the momentum. 1 good week is good, 2 good weeks is great. And that's how you transform a relegation season into a playoff season. And I think he's got every chance now of doing that.
Yeah, 100%. And you can see there that Warmer has made it through. Earlier on, of course, this was yesterday as the group winner, and Felkeine is going to be joining him in Group B there to get into top 8. And like I said, just a really big week for Felkeine. After 3 weeks of honestly poor performance, and what was it 1 point after 3 weeks I think Felkeine was on? It's got to feel just frankly terrible. Like I can't even imagine at this point. But having this a strong week last week, good win as well over Gaby, now making it through to top 8. The road to recovery is there, and it's one of the reasons why, although we've seen Felkeine have a low win rate in terms of his Grandmasters overall performance, as long as you win when it counts to stay in the league and continue on, that's, although it might not look very flashy, winning when it counts means more, right? As long as that keeps you in, right? You can not do so well, but if you win that final match, it's like when we get to top 8, whether you 2-0'd or 2-1 through the group, if you win one match in top 8 against someone who 2-0'd, who cares if they 2-0'd and you 2-1, right? Like, you're the one moving forward. So it's one of those things, it might not be pretty, but Felkeine is getting the job done so far.
Yeah, we're back a little bit to that human squishy brain fallacy.
Yeah,
about,
exactly.
Points at the end of the season being more important than points at the start, which is obviously nonsense. There are situations where it's reality, like you said. The nature of a tournament, for example, is that some matchups are always going to be more important than others. That's just the way it works out. But in a league system, points are points are points. And I think, you can talk about it coming clutch time towards the end of the season, and that is relevant, but it's relevant in the sense that it's a thing that the human psyche believes, right? And that's where pressure comes into play. That's where clutch comes into play, which I know is a much bigger thing in like American sports, where they talk about it like it's a real tangible thing. It isn't. You've all made it up. Trust us. We know what we're doing over here in European sports. But in terms of Felkeine, I think he is clutching up in the best possible way, to put it in that context, by picking up those big points and those big wins towards the end of the season. And as I mentioned at the start, that list of players, Felkeine, J4, Tice, Boston, Letter, that came into today needing to put points on the board because they were in the bottom half of the league going into this. Well, you can see now the reality of who's actually managed to make it through and progress. Boston's made it through, Felkeine's made it through, J4 has made it through. The other names on that list, they're losing a little bit of ground now on the rest of their challenges for those relegation battles.
And also as well, just as a final highlight, honestly, for me,